Hello and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns podcast for January 24th, 2025. My name is Tom Luongo and we have a lot to talk about. It's the third one I've gotten out this week. It's episode 204 and I have with me Tracy Shuchart is back in the house. And this time I have a stable internet service and I'm not under the threat of a hurricane. And I'm hoping to
no
not
generator
be nearly
power.
on backup power and all of it. And I'm like frantic. I remember reviewing the last time you were on. And I was cringing listening to myself going. I could feel all the anxiety that I had just trying to get anything out the door. And I apologize for that. So today we're going to try and have a much more relaxed chat. Tracy, thank you for showing up and doing this.
Absolutely. Thank
Cool.
you.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
All right. So I don't know. There's nothing to talk about. So why don't we just end the podcast and move on? But no, seriously, I think what we should talk about is knowing where your expertise is, and I want to dovetail everything that's happening with Trump and where you shine, which is in the commodity space. So I'd love to have you just jump off on what you think is going to happen. Broad strokes, deep strokes. I don't care, whatever you like to do about this. Let's talk about Trump, commodities, oil, and all of that, and see where we go.
Absolutely. Well, first, everybody keeps repeating this drill, baby, drill. I'm just going to tell you that it's not happening. Right.
Okay.
First of all, we've had two crashes in the oil sector, right, over the years, big ones. And nobody wants to give the oil sector any money anymore after that, right? You had, private equity, you had VC funds, you had banks, everybody got burned. Right. And so the attitude is much, much different right now. And they want to, we went from 20%, the sector was 20% of the S&P 500 down to 2% after two crashes of the S&P 500. And so, oil companies are struggling to keep investors at this juncture. And everybody wants to see them, they want to see share buybacks. They want to see capital discipline. They want to see debt paid down. They don't want to see that old wildcatter drill, baby, drill. And so it's not happening. And in fact, we've already seen, Exxon basically came out and said, yeah, that's not happening. And if we look in the oil sector, really, there's been so much consolidation since 2016. You don't have all of those wildcatters out there anymore, really, so to speak. They're all being swallowed up by the big guys. And the big guys are literally buying production instead of spending CapEx to really find more find more. And so, I mean, you're just, it's a totally different era. It's in a totally different era than when he first came into the presidency, 8 years ago. And so we're just not going to see that sort of behavior from oil companies anymore. And so, and in fact, if you read that National Energy Emergency Executive Order that came out, I don't know, I read it. I'm not sure everybody else read it, but I don't know how anybody could have interpreted that as drill, baby, drill. Basically, it was kind of more of an all-encompassing energy stance, saying we need more, we need more oil, gas, coal, nuclear, critical minerals. So it was kind of more all-encompassing. It wasn't all just about oil. We want oil companies to keep drilling.
Well, and that's interesting because I've been screaming for about 2.5 years now since the Fed, since Biden started draining the SPR with the advent of the Russia-Ukraine war, that the volatility, if you look at weekly volatility in the oil, the Brent crude market, it's doubled to the point where I've been running around for, every once in a while going, Moya bitches, make oil investable again. Literally saying, oil is uninvestable when volatility is this high because no one can plan a proper CapEx, this, that, and everything else. So to your point, and what I'm saying is I'm agreeing with you. I get what you're saying immediately because we have to return predictability to the oil sector before the investors will come back in order to start the process. And the CapEx cycle is, we're 5 to 7 years before we can even get a rational CapEx cycle again, and then the rest of it, right? I think that's what you're saying. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at, with shale, you have to keep drilling wells because their life doesn't last as long as, say, a deep oil that, really can run for decades.
Right.
So you have to constantly be drilling new wells. Um, and those are called drilled but uncompleted wells, so that you have them as a stockpile. So you just keep moving from well to well
Hmm.
as you
Right.
tap out, right? So we've really literally for the last 3 years, since last 3, 4 years, have gone through almost all of that duck inventory. Nobody's
Okay.
drilling new wells, and that's how you can see what behavior is going on. Is you
Okay.
can see that they're burning through all the inventory that they had built up years prior to that. And
Right.
so, yeah, nobody's drilling. So, I think, and in addition, you look at frac spread counts, and that's really, what crews are out there, what crews are lined up. There's,
Hmm.
that's way down as well. And so I think we've been fortunate because of technology to kind of extend some of these wells, that we've been able to produce as much as we have. And I think also we've seen over the last couple of years, a lot of these smaller guys that are left were trying to drill as much as they can in order to look attractive to be bought out.
Hmm.
And just don't have a pool of companies anymore,
Hmm.
um, that large that, I think we're definitely going to start seeing a decline. Well, we've already started seeing a decline in
Yes.
U.S. oil production.
Right. And
So,
they've also and I've talked to my friend Ben Kelleran, who runs this Contrarian Corner podcast, and he's focused on the offshore sector, and he's mentioned to me multiple times that they've redefined the what a barrel of oil equivalent is now to include more natural gas liquids and everything else. The same way
yep,
that they re-index Brent to now be 25%, WTI, and they've done all sorts of things to massage
yep,
the markets and keep the price of oil, at a certain level in order to keep gasoline, because they were clearly manipulating oil prices in order to try and quote unquote tame inflation and get Joe Biden reelected, and it didn't clearly didn't work. So, then what you have to ask yourself is, I'm just thinking ahead now to Trump sitting down and talking with Putin. And I think part of this whole thing about we have all this oil and we're going to drill it and everything else. Yeah, it's a long term. I think he's a generational statement on the part of Trump. And it's also a negotiating tactic to try and, bring Russia to the table, to do everything he can to get Russia to the table to agree to a deal, knowing full well that Russia's demands are, be honest with you, rightfully so, far higher than the West wants to pay at this point.
right.
So that's what I see. And again, I'm kind of agreeing. I'm absolutely agreeing with you. I'm just trying to add more color to this point about oil. So I guess the question I really have is what Trump is trying to dynamic he's trying to set up now is to bring the investors back in to restart the capex cycle. Would
Right.
that be fair?
Except for he's kind of doing it in the wrong way.
Okay.
Um, right? Because I don't think he fully understands the dynamic of the oil market. He
Mm,
thinks this is this is where the problem is that, there's different crude grades. They make
of course.
different products,
Right.
right? What the US produces is mostly light sweet oil. And
Hmm.
we've added condensates to that number, which
Right.
are natural gas liquids, which literally you can only make petrochemicals on.
Right.
WTI, you can only make gasoline for. And
Right.
so my thing is his tariff threat against Canada for 25% tariffs. We literally need their oil. Our refineries are tooled for it. Nobody's going to spend billions to
Right.
retool their refineries. And we need heavier fuels to run the economy. You need diesel. You need you
Well,
need jet fuel. You
it's
need
why the
all this.
entire Gulf Coast is tuned towards Venezuelan, sludge, basically. That really heavy sour stuff that comes out of Venezuela, right?
Exactly. But and even if we try to go to another country, I mean, Venezuela production's decimated. They produce
Right.
under 1 million barrels a day,
Yes.
from their height of, almost five. Um, and there aren't that many other places really, really can source that kind of heavy crude oil. And
Yeah, we
so
can.
don't think it really understands if we put 25% of tariffs on Canada, we're going to run into a problem where they're going to try to offload it to somebody else, first of all, right?
Right.
And we're going to end up in a big pickle because their oil is cheap. It's really cheap. The differential, WCS, which is Western Canadian Select, is, trading at like $20 a barrel. So
Right. Right.
you're not gonna find cheaper oil anywhere out there. And so that is my one fear about, because ultimately adding tariffs to Canadian crude is going to make oil prices higher here.
Right.
It just is because we have no other choice. There's nowhere else to buy it from. Really, you can get some from Colombia, you can get some heavy from Iraq, but I mean, most of, they're mostly tapped out as far as, who they're selling to. So,
Right. So,
there's
so
just not a lot of place.
you know where that heavy comes from? Which where it came from the last time the Trump tried to take Venezuela off the market. It came from Russia.
Exactly. And so, but
Like,
now
so
we can't do that.
now the question is that part of the conversation? Is that part of the negotiating process here in order to put pressure on the Canadians to reform? Because I mean, there's this whole, like, when I start looking at the geopolitical thing, and it becomes very clear to me that Trump is targeting the European Union and the UK as his enemies, not Russia, not China. He wants
Right.
deals with them. And so, and then Canada is also part of that problem because we're literally dealing with WEF, like the worst of the worst, Chrissy Freeland or Mark Carney
Oh, of
taking.
course. I
Right.
mean, he literally said yesterday during that speech at the WEF, he literally came out and said, Canada's a problem. Mexico's working with us. I
Right.
mean,
Right. Right. And interestingly enough, Daniel Smith, the premier of Alberta, has been to Mar-a-Lago. Remember last week when everybody was like kick Alberta out of Canada? We're like, okay, we can make Alberta
we'll
the
take
51st state, like, and then there's no tariffs, and then we get Canadian Select for $25 a barrel. We overpay for it. We pay 30.
right. So, I think, really it's the federal government that's the problem and a couple of the premiers. And really, Trump just wants border security and, to stop the drug trade. And
Right.
that's really all he's really asked for. And so I don't understand exactly the pushback of the federal government, but I don't understand, I've never understood the Liberal Party there. So that's,
Well, they
and I lived there.
I know. That's part of the reason why I knew more about Canada and certainly about the Canadian oil industry than I do. I almost know almost nothing about it other than I know that it all mostly comes from Alberta, and that was just fine. I'm a hockey fan. I know why the Oilers are named the Oilers. It's not tough. Been to Edmonton.
There you go.
It's not hard. It's there it is. It's all around you. So it's literally the only Canadian city I've been to is Edmonton. uh, so my point being is that clearly Ottawa is holding on by the skin of their teeth in order to continue to hold onto that globalist WEF agenda
Right.
that exists all across especially the English Commonwealth. And so there's that whole thing needs to be destroyed, and that's part of the reason why it's very obvious that Trump is targeting all of these places, and he's doing it very strategically, and he's letting everybody know that these relationships are going to change, and
Right.
hopefully they will change for the better, and if they don't, then they're going to get adversarial, and you're still not going to survive it. So, have fun with that, Doug Ford, but it's not going to work for you.
Right. Exactly.
Premier
And
of
so
Ontario.
yeah, and he's been kind of hostile,
Kinda.
and
Kinda.
in some of his statements, I'm like, look, dude, just fix the border, and that's all the guy wants.
Right.
Just to him.
Fix the word. The Canadian dollars are already so cheap that we can buy your oil basically for almost nothing. Like, we're happy to import it
So,
or continue to
and
import it.
and they don't really have. I mean, they do have export capabilities, but they would have to. They don't have. Everything's connected to the U.S., right? All
Mm-hmm.
the pipelines are connected to the U.S. All the trains are. to carry oil to the U.S.
I would
I
go
mean,
back to we
so
go back a decade ago when Shell and everybody had to put the kibosh on Kitimat in British Columbia, the export terminal, the
right,
LNG and oil export terminal, and that's dead, mothballed for 10 years.
yeah,
You don't
exactly.
have
So
a path to China or to Japan or anywhere else.
exactly. And so, I mean, they could build it out. They build out some of their LNG that they can now sell to Asia. But really, they're going to be stuck with their oil, which is why Danielle Smith's bending over backwards
Right.
to try and make a deal with Trump, and basically is split from the federal government. I mean, she was always kind of a thorn in their side, but
Yes.
really now she's a thorn in their
Yeah,
side.
no, she absolutely is. And I'm kind of plugged in somewhat into Alberta politics through my relationship with Sean Newman, the Sean Newman podcast, and some of my patrons and whatnot. And it's very, very clear that Alberta politics is done with Ottawa, and
Yeah.
I mean in a way that is in ways we have not seen that, and I don't think anybody's prepared for. So I fully expect Ottawa I fully expect sorry, Alberta to make their
There.
grievances well known in the coming days.
Yeah. And and they have Saskatchewan and Manitoba that
Mm,
both produce oil, obviously not as much,
right.
but they're pretty much riding on Danielle's coattails. They'll do
Sure.
whatever, for their industry. So
Right. And if it wasn't for Vancouver, from what I understand, British Columbia would be along for the ride as well, and that whole western half of Canada. And it's so yeah. I mean, I know there's a framework for a deal here, certainly with with the Canadians, and I also firmly believe there's a very good framework for a deal between the Americans and the Russians over this ending Ukraine and ending all this rotten nonsense and working stuff out and de-escalating all the conflicts around the world. Like that's what I. It's clear that's what Trump wants.
oh, obviously. And the big problem is going to be the pushback from Europe over the NATO issue, right? Which
Right. Well,
Ukraine should never join NATO. I mean, I
never.
understand, but I think obviously the Europeans keep promising that it'll happen, even though we have yet to
Well,
see that
yeah.
happen. But
Yeah, they promised Erdogan and Turkey that he could join the EU for 15 years, and they strung him along. And he finally just basically told them, fuck you, we're done, and I'm taking Syria. Like that's it. I mean, I don't want to make light of anything that Erdogan's
right,
done because it's much more complicated than that. But like in the end of the day, like, oh, really? Okay, fine. We're sending all. I'm going to send all the refugees in, the Syrian refugees in, or I'm going to. No, you won't let them in. Find them. I'm going to take Syria and I'm going to send them home, and I'm going to make them happy that I'm going to give them their homes back. And that's part of that's one of the dynamics that nobody's talking about with Turkey moving into Damascus. But that's a different podcast for a different day. But yes, your point is well taken. The pushback is going to come from Europe, but uh, at this point, I'm looking at Europe as like I've got a 12-pound rat terrier, and he thinks he's the biggest guy on the block, and he'll fight anyone. And I've got a 95-pound Maremma, who thinks he's the most adorable chew toy of all time. Like,
yeah. I mean, obviously, Europe's industry has been decimated because of their ridiculous energy policies that were only exacerbated after the war in Ukraine. And so, most of the, I mean, most of, in a lot of German companies are moving to the US because they're
I
just
know.
like, get it, right? You just
And
have
then
BASF just built, like, expanded their facility here twofold and then shut their facility in Germany. I mean, so we've got industry leaving for the United States. And so they don't really have a lot of leverage.
no, they really don't, especially if Trump drops the corporate tax rate for people working in the United States to 15%.
Right.
Um, like it, and the accelerated depreciation, if he keeps the accelerated depreciation schedule that businesses have, the 50% one-time write down in the first year, that kind of thing, that was immense. I mean, and so I can see what's going to happen for him, that they're setting up in Congress this fight over taxes and the budget and all this, and a couple of his more colorful, I shall say, cabinet appointments, but they're going to lose on all those fronts. I think they're going to collapse very, very quickly because no one is, no one is going to be down with a 45% tax increase in the middle
No,
class. It's not going to happen.
no, no one is, and your congressman would never get elected again. So,
Mhm. Now, if we are in a post-politics environment, this is the caveat to that line of thinking. And I've been thinking about this a lot recently, at least in a kind of nascent sense. We're almost in a post. All the politics we've ever known before are ending, and the question now is, how many of those people that are in Congress today that are true believers would rather vandalize the world and burn it to the ground than lose? I know Nancy Pelosi is one of them, right? Elizabeth Warren is one of them, but the big one is going to be those squishy Democrats in the middle and those rhinos in the middle that are like, dude, this is my only gig and this is the best gig I've ever had, and I'm not qualified to go back and open in a law practice that I got a C plus in, I graduated with a 2.3 and at State
right.
University, right? Like this is the best job I'm ever going to have, and I would like to keep it. So that's more of Congress, I think, than a lot of people are considering, but it is something that we have to be aware of, that there are a lot of people on Capitol Hill that are true believers to this stuff, or just so compromised that they can't, they don't feel like they have the opportunity to
Right. You have like
go
the
against
Lindsey
their
Grahams and the
right. Yeah. Well,
the,
it's what I like to call the manila envelope quotient, right? How big is your manila envelope quotient, and how many of them are somebody going to slap on the desk and say, no, you work for me because you can't pass the dead hooker live boy test, right? And
right.
that's the thing, like, and that's part of Washington as well. So there's all these dynamics up on Capitol Hill, but with the slim majority that they've created on Capitol Hill, for him, and maybe the swing vote is whether or not John Fetterman does what everybody's thinking he's going to do, and he's going to switch to the Republican Party, giving them and neutralizing Lisa Murkowski and
Right.
Susan Collins, right? And if that happens, then Trump is going to sail through his entire agenda, and Fetterman knows this.
So, and yeah, I think he does know that. But I mean, he does lean right
I
in
know he does.
most of his things. I mean, he may call himself a Democrat, but he leans right
He's
in most everything.
and you have
So,
to. Yeah, I have to give it up to the guy that's showing up at the inauguration in a pair of
oh
gym
my
shorts
God,
and
in
a
the
hoodie.
shorts and the hoodie.
I'll give him that one. I'm like, he's like, yeah, the hell with this. Like, no, this is what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, I don't think I have that big a pair of balls if I were a senator, but it'd be
Right.
it'd be real close on some days, like to show
Well,
up
they
with.
just kind of let him do what he wants.
That's true, and while they brain damaged, that kind of right. They're supposedly they had the stroke and brain damage and all that. So they give him a pass because because
That
he's
guy.
the he's that guy, right? And you're like, yeah, I mean, he's not that guy, and that's going to be interesting to watch this play out.
Yeah, I
So what
think.
else are you looking at? What else are you looking at?
So I think also, just on the commodity side of the things
Huh?
before, we move into a different arena, I think right now, if we're looking at metals, and I'm talking base and industrial metals,
Sure.
they've been a little bit erratic because of this, because they're fearful of, China tariffs. Now,
Right.
what's interesting to me is it was, at first, what was it? He was like, we're going to have 60% tariffs. Then it was 25%. Then we heard 10%. And then yesterday he was like, well, I don't really know. And so I think kind of there's a little bit of sketchiness in those markets right now because they're just not quite
Hmm.
sure. They get really, they got really excited at that 10%. And
Right.
then, so I think, those are kind of a volatile markets to at least to day trade right now for any reason.
Well, I
Um,
mean, they're in
so
serious. They've been in serious trouble now, like kind of pumping around, bouncing around on their support lines. If you look across like copper, well, copper's broken out to start the
copper's,
year.
yeah, copper looks good, but if you look at any kind of, lithium or
Sure.
nickel or, all of those kind
Aluminum.
of
Yeah.
have been hit. And so they kind of want to pop their head up, but tariffs would
Well,
just kind of
so
put the
I
kibosh
so
on
it's funny what I will say, and I'm glad you brought up industrial metals because that was where I was hoping you were going to go anyway. Because it is the one market, the other market, like the oil market. because I think it dovetails perfectly with the oil market. If we're not going to have a crash in the oil price, right? This is why Trump was screaming to Saudi Arabia, we got to get the oil price down. We got to get the oil
Right.
price down. Right. Because he knows he doesn't really have the ability right now, as you were saying. That's the clear tell that what you were saying at the beginning of the podcast is spot on correct, right? That we're not going to be able to increase production. So now, look, industrial metals prices are downstream in a commodity cost push inflation environment
Right.
to,
Yeah.
of oil. So if oil's not going down, then we're going to finally see a breakout there. And, at the same time, he's going to want interest rates coming down. And I just, that's what I see all of that as another
And
round of, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and metals really have suffered the same problem that oil has, and the fact that there's been no capex for the last
Right.
7 years, really, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to clean up their act as well.
Mm-hmm.
And, lower prices are certainly not helping the situation. We've seen a lot of, curtailing of production just because it's not cost effective. So, but I think that they're ready, to break out. I think it's a really good place to be. I just think it's going to be a little bit tough until we have some more clarity on if and what tariffs are going to be enacted on.
That is my assessment as well. I mean, I've been long industrial metals for a 2020. I've been thinking in terms of being long 20 industrial metals in 2025 on a return of commodity cost push inflation.
Right.
But it may take a quarter or two for all of this to shake out. But second half of the
Exactly.
year, we could have a massive bull run, beginning of a massive bull run across the entire metal space, and possibly timber and a bunch of other commodities just in general. So
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if we do see, if you want to fix the housing markets and, get builders to build again,
mm-hmm.
I think that's also an interesting place. I think, if we see manufacturing brought back, uh, and we get mining permits to
Right.
go through faster than 10 years.
Yeah.
Then,
Well, that was the
um,
one EO that was really interesting that he pointed out. I had Vince Launchie on the podcast a couple days ago, and we were saying, okay, so what do you think is going to happen in 2025? And one of the things that Vince pushed back on me about was he said, I don't think Trump's going to be able to get most of his agenda about refineries and drill baby drill and all this stuff enacted because of the permitting process and everything else. And then 24, it was like 48 hours later, I sent him the EO where literally changes the entire permitting structure to the United States. And he went,
exactly.
oh, I guess I was wrong. Happy
Which
to
is
be
going to
so.
be great for, the critical minerals,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because we've literally, we've had the DOD, Department of Defense, has literally given money to Canadian miners for critical minerals, like
Mm-hmm.
and NMG, which is a Quebec mining company for graphite.
Right.
They gave them, but we gave them like millions of dollars, because it's a
Yeah.
critical mineral, right? And
Right.
so, and so yeah, I think it could be really interesting. And if we can get permitting done a lot faster, that opens the door for the United States, which is great. And then we don't have to be
Yeah.
as reliant on
And I think
China.
that's when I think that, like, I think the way we can look at this is that as of right now, the CapEx cycle in most commodities, per the WEF agenda to make transportation evil, then and to destroy the United States' comparative advantage, which is all of that, in order to make the world safe for common turn again. That's my interpretation. I'll just go with that. That the way that Trump restarts and accelerates the capex cycle is what he's doing right now, but it's going to be a durable and generational shift that's going to have to take
Right.
place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And our permitting system is ridiculous and a half. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it really shouldn't take that long. It takes 10 years to get a permit. And then that doesn't include all the, lawsuits that you're going to go through because every environmentalist is going to sue you for
Right.
something.
No, I think that's going to end. And I think the culture around that is all going to end very, very quickly because that's the culture we're in now. And it's the culture we've
And it's
wanted, but
not
we haven't.
working, and it's not
Yeah,
working.
working. Not only is it not working, it's destructive to the point of I mean, and this is an important thing, from we can shift, why this is important, why the commodity markets are so damn important is because they create the things necessary to create civilization and culture.
Right.
Without a stable commodity system that produces them it produces them stably and reasonably, these should be the most boring markets in the world that nobody should be interested in. And they're
Uh,
always like in the news. And there's a reason for that. And it's
because all of these policies are making it difficult to live in. You can't, I mean, you just there are no low commodity usage countries that are rich, right? If you
right.
pretty much, you know, if you're not using commodities, you're a poor country, right? And
Yeah.
so
If you can't bring them to market and then utilize them locally to build wealth and move up the structure of production, then what are you doing? Then you're there literally as the endpoint of some other colonialist process of their strip mining, and you're just the mining stock, and then the money is and the commodities are going somewhere else. And this is what Europe is absolutely livid about: is that their entire colonialist means of way of doing things is coming to an end.
well, it's falling apart. I mean, look, if you look at Africa right now,
Mm-hmm.
you had Sudan kick out France, basically.
Right.
I mean, France is losing some countries over there. I mean, and those countries are tired of Europe telling them, they don't have electricity, and they're telling them you need wind and solar. That's expensive, intermittent, doesn't work, and they're tired of Europe sort of telling them that this is what you need when, they're literally just trying to get out of poverty. They need the cheapest form that they can get in the infrastructure for it. And, you've got somebody over your head saying, well, we'll only give you money if you do things the way we want you to do. So skip all these steps that we went through.
Right.
And then,
Well, and worse than that, it's almost like this. I mean, the way the Europeans have structured the argument, and they've infected the U.S. and Canada and Australia and other places with the same idea, which is that, well, getting rich through the exploitation of the world's natural bounty, that's actually evil. And so we all need to go back to you. We're all going to need to go back to the noble savage. And noble savage is sitting here going, dude, I want clean water. I don't want my children to die in childbirth. And
right?
it's all, and they're like,
It's
there's got to
it's
be a
that
happy
whole
medium here.
yeah, so that whole degrowth mindset, like, we all need to live in caves again, so to save the
So
environment.
we don't hurt the planet. And, and then war comes and hurts the planet.
Right.
Like, the most environmentally destructive thing that we can activity by humans is war,
Or right.
not
And
cows farting.
but nobody says that's bad. Like, go ahead, bomb the shit out of each other. But
Exactly. Yeah.
I
No,
mean,
no one talks about the carbon footprint of Oreshniks
of the
and
millet of
155 millimeter artillery
well, the
shells.
military and the US military is the largest consumer of fossil fuels on the planet over any country. Period.
By an order of magnitude, it's the largest consumer of diesel fuel on the planet by far.
Yes.
Yes,
And
thank you for.
so
I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. No, it's a point I've made before, and I'm glad somebody else remember that it's so important. And like, how about we stop doing this?
right.
And you know that and that diesel fuel could go to, I don't know, building cool things. I saw a thing this morning. Okay, this is good. I don't know how much you care about the technology space and everything, but I saw a really interesting thing this morning. Saw a tweet from somebody this morning. It says Silicon Valley over the last 10 years gave us the iPhone and I don't know, Twitter or something like that. And Elon Musk, is catching rockets and getting ready to send this to the moon and putting, point to point satellite communications around the phone companies. Like Silicon Valley is part of the problem. Like,
Oh, absolutely. Well, they're all part of that mindset, right? Which is weird because it's technology, right? Like, but
this is not to say that I have anything against the iPhone or anything like that. It's just a
oh,
different mindset of where their focus is as to what what products they're trying to produce. Now, it's not to say that some of Apple's technology is not making it into the things that Musk is going to wind up doing and everything else. Don't get me wrong. It's all part of the same big web of the distributed market that makes the free market a brilliant thing. Don't get me wrong, but it was just an interesting dichotomy.
yeah, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But, maybe that'll change, or, maybe they're just sucking up to the new administration because, you had Zuckerberg and Bezos
Maybe
at the inauguration. So, I don't know.
it's funny. By the way, he put Musk and Bezos. I don't know if you noticed this. My partner Dexter White noticed that he put Musk and Bezos next to each other in the inauguration, had them sitting next to each other. It's like,
Oh, yeah. Well,
boys,
and Zuckerberg, but they were all three like in a row, right?
were
Weren't
they?
they?
Okay, I missed the Zuckerberg part.
Yeah.
I also know somebody else noted. I saw on Twitter that that Tulsi Gabbard was sitting right next to the CEO of TikTok.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I did. It was a passing tweet. I saw
That's
that
funny.
same, like a couple of hours after Dexter noted the thing about Bezos and Trump. I happened to be scrolling through my Twitter feed and I saw that. And I'm like,
That's crazy.
that's good. So that was good.
Interesting.
That's good.
Oh,
So I
but yeah, and then, just going back to, the thing with Europe is what's so crazy is that they are pushing this agenda, but then doing the dumbest things on the planet, like, I don't know, cutting off, Russian gas and then closing down your nuclear plants.
and then having Robert Habeck, the Green Vice Chancellor of Germany, say, but we have to cut ourselves off from American LNG as well. I'm like,
Yeah, I'm
oh.
like, what? I like, really?
So I'm going to go get my straight razor, and I'm not just going to. I'm going to it's like the old Monty Python cartoon from the Holy Grail, where he's the guy starts lathering up his face to shave, and then he does his whole head, and then boom, and then he lops his own head off. Right? This, and that's all I can see from Europe at this point. Like, oh, really?
Oh, absolutely. And, and they have this policy coming up um, that basically says, you have to be under our emission standard globally. So wherever you are. So otherwise you have to pay us a percentage. And literally you had Qatar came out and said, then we just won't sell you gas.
Yeah, like
They
okay,
literally said, that's ridiculous. We're not going to be, have EU rules and I need to pay you 5% of my, as a fee of
yeah.
what I'm sending out globally. You've got to be kidding me, right?
Well, no, but
Um,
this has been their model, and their model was in California, and California did the same thing. They built California into a durable political advantage, which they then used to rework all of the regulations that they put in place in California across the United States, and they've done the same. And and the EU is built on the same model that we're so indispensable and so politically powerful that we can demand of the rest of the world that they
yeah,
do
now,
they hive to our they hive to our rules. Now that was nice when they collectively were 10, 12, 13% of global GDP. They're now 5 and falling.
and we're making money. I mean, California's billions in debt now. It used to be
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to derail. I have a very deep theory about the Fed and Fed funds rate and California. I don't want to go into here because it's not really germane. But California was built on the back of cheap money in the Federal Reserve, the same way that Germany was built on the back of the Marshall Plan, protection tariffs, and then eventually the euro. And both of those are failing at the same time, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing for the world. because they need to be reformed completely and they need to be um, uh, rebuilt root and branch at a political, societal level all the way up.
Well,
And I don't
Stephanie,
know that it's going to happen, but
well, it would be nice, but I know at some point you've got to wake up. I mean, you have industries fleeing California so
mm-hmm.
fast. I mean, you already had Chevron and um Phillips 66 are like moving their refineries out. They were just like last year, they
Yeah.
were like, we've had enough.
Oh,
We'll
right,
see you later.
right.
So they're supposed to leave in 2025 and 2026. They're like, this is a
Well,
hostile, they called it a hostile business environment.
yeah, well, you're not wrong, but look at look at how that plays into ultimately what these insane people at Davos think that they want to do, which is they need to burn down the old system and then rebuild it. And they're trying to destroy everybody who has a durable political advantage or economic advantage over them. And if they can't win, then they're going to just crash everything on their way out the door. I literally look at them and they're just like the Joker. There's that scene from The Dark Knight where he's like going to blow up the hospital and the thing's not quite working right. And then it does. And that's they literally make that they literally look like that when they get done at the podium. And they're like, these people really are fucking vandals. And we have
They're
to realize that
they're
that's what we're
literally
dealing with.
insane. And I don't
Yes.
believe people listen to them for like Klaus Schwab. Really? Really?
Ursula
He's
von
like,
der Leyen is insane.
she is. Yes.
She is. I used to just think she was evil, but the more I listen to her speak, and the more I watch her and her body
She's
language and
insane.
demeanor,
And a criminal on
she's
top
at
of
a
it.
well that many times over my life. No, I mean what I mean is like she's like in a different reality.
Yeah. No,
Like she needs lithium and she needs to be put in a home. Like
you you can see more and more. I think it's becoming like I think maybe she used to be able to hide it a little better, but it
mhm.
seems like, the world's, falling down around her. The EU is literally falling apart. And she's like, we need to, you know, get even closer together. We need to mix our capital markets. I was like, what are you talking about? What you're doing so far is literally killing every country in
Well,
Europe.
as I said
She's
many
like, we
times, I
need to
don't.
get in more intertwined. I'm like,
Yeah. Well, they have a Gantt chart over at Evil Corp Central, and they're just running it. And she's just one of the lieutenants. And I started using that metaphor a little over a year ago. And every day, it just they're just on autopilot. These people. That's what I mean by, I guess, when I say they live in an echo chamber, so bereft of real information. Like I honestly think that Ursula von der Leyen thinks more than 1 million Russians have been killed in Ukraine. I really
uh,
think that.
oh,
And
definitely she does. But they don't talk to anybody else. You think they
right,
actually go out on the streets and talk to actual people? No. They just sit in a room with each other
hoi
and talk. That's
polloi,
all they see.
really? No, those people are just tax cattle. Like
Right.
we have a world to save. We don't have time for the hoi polloi.
That is actually what you are, the carbon they want to
Yeah, we are the carbon they want to reduce. Exactly. There's no argument there. And they want to get rid of these too. This is why I always smoke a cigar now whenever I do a podcast just to stick it in everybody's eye. Like I don't sometimes I do 2 or 3 of them in a day. I'm like, Christ, I don't want to smoke another cigar, but I'm like, yeah, no, I need to keep doing this. This is my little act of
This
defiance.
is
I'm so friggin' petulant sometimes. I can't. I know. I'm such a little boy. Um, but I can't help it. Like it is who I am. Okay. So what else have you noticed from Trump or this kind of inflection point, or just in general? We don't have to talk about markets. You can talk about anything you want. Just kind of wrap up, do another 10, 15 minutes or so of whatever you think is on your mind, because it's just fascinating.
I think what's really interesting, and I'd like to get your opinion on this too, you
Hmm.
know, uh, what do you think the Fed is going to do? And are they going to be fighting some kind of like, I think, I know everybody says inflation's dead, central banks have it beat, everybody, and I've interviewed people and everybody seems that seems to be the consensus of the people I've talked to. But
Wow.
I don't think by any means that is going to happen. And I think a lot of Trump's policies are initially going to be inflationary.
I agree.
So, you know, I don't know exactly how the central bank is, or Federal Reserve. I don't really care about what the ECB does, but
Right.
how the Federal Reserve is going to react to that, because I don't think inflation's away, in Europe either.
No.
But
No.
perhaps enough of their industry dies off that it is. Uh, but really, obviously, my concern is in the United States. So I really think it's kind of going to be interesting. What do you think the Fed is going to do? I mean,
I have a very detailed answer for you on this.
I want to
Uh,
detail that.
okay, let's start with what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. Oil prices are not going down.
Right.
Okay, so inflation is not beat. The Japanese have to raise interest rates in order to tame inflation. The Europeans desperately need to go to the zero bound because they are on the verge of a sovereign debt crisis, because Trump and Powell and the banking system are creating I think they're going to create a soft closing of our capital account. They're not going to just like close our capital account. I think they're going to do a soft control on it, meaning they're going to make domestic dollars cheaper than euro dollars. And I think that is the thing that is really important. Therefore, Europe is going to have to arrest its rate cutting cycle because they're going to be dealing with inflation that they can't deal with. They either have to let the euro go, or they're fighting that tooth and claw,
Right.
or they have to start raising rates again. Powell, on the other hand, has the leeway here to cut rates. When I look at the yield curve currently, it is pretty much flat out to 6 months, dips about 10, 15 basis points at the 1 year, and then up like a shot. So if I'm the FOMC chair and I want a normalized yield curve, which is exactly what Powell has been engineering for the last 9 months, wouldn't I cut rates here and get the short end of the curve, which I have control over, down by 15 basis points, 20 basis points, and then have a
Right.
normally upsloping yield curve and make sure that the 210 spread is between 40 and 50 basis points now, and that can move out towards 100, which would change the banks from casino gamblers to boring 363 net interest margin banking, which is what
Right.
we want. We want to make banks normal again. We want to make net interest margin lending great again, right? So I think in the face of all this, the Fed in September, when they cut 50 basis points, chose the banks and inflation, or chose labor over fighting inflation.
Right.
They wanted to. So by doing that, I fully expect we're going to go through another round of inflation this year. It's going to be 3 to 4%. And Trump's gutting of various public departments and freezing spending and all that, that's deflationary. And I think we're going to get more cuts from the Fed that the market is handicapping. And I'm not saying we're
What do
going back
you
to the zero bound. I think 3% at the end of the year, I think is reasonable. I think the silver futures market is completely wrong at 4%. I think that's rotten nonsense. And I think 3.25 to 3 by December 2025 is where the Fed, I'll be honest with you, where the Fed should be if we cut $2 trillion from spending and we end
Right.
all the wars and we do all this and we do all that. I mean, I think that's where we need to be. And then we can have a 30-year trading in between 5.25 and 5.5, the 10-year trading at around 5, and the 2 trading at around 3.7, 3.6, and or whatever. And then you have a good 210 spread that the banks can lend against. The oil companies can start to figure out how to restart their capex cycle. Blah 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 blah. And I think that's the plan. And then the question is, how do you minimize the inflation on the upside and start the recapitalization process? And that's where the tax cuts and everything else comes into play. I think it's possible. I don't think it's going to be without pain, but I think it's possible. So,
Interesting theory. Yeah, I mean, if you could, eh, I like that.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and
Our
and
breath.
and you engender a sovereign debt crisis in Europe at the same time and break the European Union politically, and you neuter the Bank of England. Those are the stretch goals.
I mean,
I mean, I want it all. Like that's what I
I
want.
want it all.
Yeah.
I think Europe's already kind of doing a good job themselves. So we'll
Mhm.
see. I think German elections will be very interesting to
Yes,
see
they will.
what happens. I can't, German people are crazy if they reelect these people again. I mean,
Well, I don't think they're going to have much choice because the political class in Germany, unfortunately, over the last 6 years, I've learned more about German politics than any person should ever learn in a lifetime. That who's not German. Um, and what I'll say is this: the German political class is dead set against AfD being a part of the government, and so no matter what they do, they're not going to be a part of the government. They would rather freeze the freeze if the election, let's put it this way, if AfD were to like surge to 30%, which is possible, it's outside chance, but it's possible, it would preclude there being a majority government in the Bundestag without, from the other parties that are left standing,
right.
or it would be a very tenuous and ugly coalition that would be very unstable. um Steinmeier, the president, will absolutely just like shit over everything for 6 months and then eventually allow a minority government to take root after leaving a caretaker government in place for 6 months, because nothing will change under that. And that's the globalist plan, is to extend and pretend.
Right.
So AfD, all they can do here is become the opposition and then look for the next election cycle down the road. So it's going to be a replay of what we saw in like the UK and France, where the globalists lose, really, but they wind up winning anyway. Right. And then a
Right.
year later, now Keir Starmer could possibly be
Oh
lost.
my
And
God.
yeah. And the rest of it. So,
I didn't think they could do worse in the UK, but wow. But
mm-hmm.
again, the way their system is, I mean, he's got a minority government too. I mean, it's just, like Trudeau has a minority government. The only reason
Right.
he's in power is because of NDP. He
Mm-hmm.
certainly, eh, he's had the longest running minority government in the history of Canada, which is
Right.
just insane to me.
It is. But that's the problem when, it's very clear that we have people who do not believe in the will of the people in charge. I was talking to Dave Collum the other day. He was on the podcast, and he said, we were talking about the Carrie Underwood singing "America the Beautiful" a cappella after, the
Oh, that was so good.
technical glitches. And he said, and Dave said, "Did you watch that? And you see all the people, all the Democrats behind her, having to mouth the words to America the Beautiful, but they showed no desire to actually look patriotic on television, because they fucking hate America,
Oh,
and
oh,
the people who run Canada fucking hate Canada, and it's disgusting."
oh, absolutely, it is. But I mean, well, Trudeau is gone, but you know, you've got Freeland or Mark Carney, which are two terrible, terrible twins. They're the same. They're almost worse
They're
than
worse than
Trudeau.
Trudeau.
So I was like, I think I tweeted something about that. I was like, well, just when you thought it couldn't get worse.
Mark Carney's back. Like, this guy is like herpes. He never goes away. He goes
Oh
to the
my.
Bank of Canada, then he goes to the Bank of
Then he goes
England. Now he's not.
banking.
Now he wants to be prime minister. He's like Mark Rutte. Like, he loses
uh,
in the Netherlands, and now he's in charge of NATO. Like,
right.
they wanted to, and then they tried to move Stoltenberg out of NATO to the head of the Norwegian central bank to ensure that they had control over the bank in Norway, because it's like literally the only oil producing nation left in Europe.
They're the only country with actual money.
Yeah, with actual money. When I look at the TIC report and I see that Norway keeps buying U.S. treasuries, I'm like, well, that makes sense. They sell oil. Everybody else is
Right.
buying it to pretend to extend and pretend the currency and bond, fiction that we have. But the Norwegians are like, yeah, we buy $4 or $5 worth of treasuries every month because we've got a massive trade surplus from $80 barrel oil. Makes sense.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. But so I don't know. I was talking to somebody in the UK, and I was like, you guys go through, prime ministers, like, I'm like, well, how is this guy still here? And they're like, oh, he'll probably be here for another, throughout his term, which is 5 years. That's insane to me.
He has a super majority in parliament. What has to happen is, I don't know British politics. I don't know the exigent circumstances that can get rid of a government like that. The king has to dissolve parliament, and
Right.
until Charles is gone, I think that's the process. The king has to dissolve parliament in an emergency. He can emergency degree and get rid of parliament.
Right.
So it would mean that Charles would either have to die or abdicate the throne and hand it over to William, who would then get rid of Keir Starmer and then call for open elections. And at that point, Nigel Farage would wind up becoming prime minister like pretty quickly.
Yeah.
The way that if you the British put the British polling is fascinating recently. I don't know if you've seen it. The reform is now
Oh, it's
the
skyrocketed.
yeah 25% between
Skyrocketed.
the Tories and reform. So the stage is set here, and that's why I think Trump's pressure and why he sent Elon Musk out there naked with a cock ring and a submachine gun and a propeller beanie, like going after Keir
Going
Starmer.
after.
I think that was done on purpose. He was the berserker to like point the to point the path. That's where we're going next and call the play, as it were. And yeah, I think there's something very interesting happening there as well. And so I'm going to keep watching that kind of carefully.
Absolutely. Definitely
It's my
something.
nod to being a little bit of a Q-tard, but we'll see.
We'll
Um,
see. I mean, it's definitely on my radar. I think that the UK is waking up, or at least, some of their ministers or parliament members are, because they just came out today and said, we think we're going to get rid of that windfall tax for oil and gas companies because they're all leaving.
mhm.
And, I think they just had this big storm, right? And they had no wind, they're using 60% gas. They have no gas left. They were producing gas. They don't produce gas anymore. All of the majors are, leaving. They're like, well, fine, we're gonna go. And so I thought that was interesting. They came out this morning and said, we're gonna relook over this windfall tax issue because we think there's a better way to uh, deal with volatile oil prices.
Yes. Well, interestingly enough, this morning coming out of the Guardian, somebody just sent this to me literally on Twitter as we were doing this. Labor MPs ordered to sink landmark climate and environment bill. If I think the Trump fork between City of London and Brussels is working.
Oh, I think so. I think so too. I think so as well. And I was talking to a journalist friend of mine who lives
Mhm.
over there. He basically said, the feeling here is like, Trump's going to save us,
Right.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
he
No.
literally said that's kind of the feeling over here is,
Good.
kind of like the beacon, and he's going to get us out of this mess, which I
And
thought was
and
very interesting because, generally, the UK kind of thinks they're a little better than us.
yeah.
Right?
Oh, just a little bit. But no, that is interesting that you say that, and it's interesting that we're starting to get that push through the consciousness in the UK to in that direction. And if you can get Londoners to start thinking this way, and again, if if everything I've been talking about for the last 3 years about the Fed and SOFR and LIBOR and all this stuff has been a big grand metaphoric fight between Wall Street and City of London, or Wall Street, Chicago, and City of London.
Right.
If City of London is finally realizing that they can't go with Brussels, that if they want to survive at all, that they're going to lose to Wall Street because Wall
Right.
Street's more powerful than they are at this point, and there's nothing you can do about it. And with Trump clearing out the State Department and the CIA and all the other, intelligence assets that help support the city's
All of that.
operations around the world, then yeah, at some point everybody gets put under existential threat and has to look in the mirror and go, "Yep, going with those guys." Get rid of Starmer, get rid of this one, get rid of that. And notice how Liz Truss has been running around doing the podcast circuit, talking about how she was ousted
She
from
was
government.
right. Yeah, she's like, I was right.
Uh, well, I mean, I remember when that
She's
happened,
been
and
saying
the
she did
first thing I remember going on, I was on with Alexander McPherson to Duran, right as that was happening, and Alex, and Alex was kind of poo pooing her mini budget and this, that, and everything else. And I said, no, Alex, you're missing the point. The point of that mini budget was that they were going to drill off of the North Shore. They were going to reopen up all those North Shore assets. The Brits have a ton of oil up there. The Scots are being destroyed by this. This is actually the right way out of this. And
Yes.
what's happening right now feels like an exterior operation by someone else. And inferentially at that point in time was before we found out that Larry Fink was literally blackmailing the Bank of England, which is what he did.
Right.
That was like days before that finally kind of leaked out into what happened. I'm like, no, this is the right thing. This is Liz stating a moment of sovereignty, I don't like Liz Truss. I think she's a war hawk and she's crazy. But on this front, she's right. And then Queen Elizabeth is dead a couple of days later, and I've been calling it the coup against the Lizzes now for like 2.5 years, and yeah, 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 because they were both gone within a week.
True. I didn't put those two together. My
I did.
conspiratorial mind did not.
My life. I can't help it. But I mean, again, that's the world I live in on a daily basis. That's what I look for on a daily basis. So if you
Right.
again, and people, if you miss it, you shouldn't miss. You should miss it. To be honest with you, you have to be insane like I am. But so the UK really is in a very interesting position here, and it's like if you if they don't make the right choice, it's over. Like for the next 400 years, it's over. And that's what Trump is telling everyone. That's why he's going after Greenland. He's going after Greenland saying, look, we're moving our defenses back to Greenland, to this hemisphere. Europe is, Europe, you deal with the Russians. You hate the Russians so much, you deal with them. Have fun. Like I can see that coming. Like it's so obvious.
Well, I mean, I think there's an interesting theory out there from some people that the EU is going to have to end up buying Russian gas again, whether they like it or not. And
Yeah.
so, I think that's a very interesting view because, I think some of the politicians kind of won it because it was cheap and it worked and the industry
I mean,
stayed.
they had the best of both. They had the best of all possible worlds. These people.
But you can't, but obviously, they turned this into craziness.
Well,
So we'll see. It'll be interesting.
the point that I've been trying to make for a long, long time, just to kind of clarify it for people again, is that they really did think they had political and economic control, monetary control over the United States, and they were going to use that to leverage to fight their wars for them everywhere else and maintain their durable advantage, keep the protection tariffs up, keep the trade surplus into Europe up, and then that would eventually create the petro euro, which is what was happening with cheap Russian gas and cheap Russian oil, and the euro settling more and more petroleum trading around the world, and they fully expected Biden and company to, and for the Russians to fold in the war, and that gambit has turned out disastrously. And the Russians saw it coming a mile away and just said, "We're not going to. This is how we're going to fight this. We're going to fight this until you run out of the money and the men and the material to fight it, and we will win because we can run a war of attrition in Ukraine better than anybody else because we know how to do it. We've been doing it for hundreds of years."
Absolutely. And it's, Europe doesn't have obviously as much money as the United States, and they're giving everything they can to this war in this mindset that it's going to work, and it's not going to work is the problem.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, what I really hope happens here is that Trump negotiates a durable peace over Ukraine. Europe gets what they want, which is they crash their economy and then rebuild it with their own military industrial complex. That's clearly what France and Germany are angling for here, right? The French are definitely angling for this.
They have no military though.
Well, they have to rebuild it all, and they imported all of these people from around the world. I saw this morning. This is okay in a note about what was going on in Ireland, the political situation in Ireland, which I haven't been following. All right. Michael Martin is now prime minister, or whatever is going on over in Ireland. But I saw in a note there or a couple of days ago, that they're now going to be using immigrants. They're recruiting immigrants into the Garda in Ireland. So now they're going to have foreign invaders as the police force,
as their military,
Yeah. Yeah. Like that's not the globalist plan. Like they're destroying Ireland. And we have to go in and save. I'm at this point now where I'm like, no. Trump needs to put as much pressure on this as possible. Trump needs to save the Irish. Just like he needs to save the Canadians and he needs to save the Britons, and the Scots. He needs to save all these people, and he can do it. I'm at that point now. I'm like, no, this is war against orcs coming Mordor in Brussels, Mordor on the Seine or whatever river the Brussels is on. That's what we need to we need to we need to fix this one. This is it's
They're on the Rhine River, yeah.
and is
Um,
it the Rhine? I don't remember. My
but
European geography is a little poor.
uh, yeah, I mean, if he does that, then Brussels is isolated and
Yeah.
screwed, and then they can just globalist themselves out to death, whatever.
Well, and then go back to what you said earlier about the Chinese, about his Zopa and the tariffs to the Chinese, and he's gone from 60% tariffs to 25 to 10. So no, Xi and I are talking. Like it's clear that the Xi and Trump are getting together, and Putin, they're all going to get together and they're going to go, look, the big problem here we all hate is the Europeans. Let us just deal with these people, and then we can have a nice simple world. And they're like, yeah, sounds good. Why don't we do that? What are we having for lunch this afternoon? We good? Yeah, we're going to sell out Europe. It's a new Yalta.
Well, I mean, Trump hasn't, except for the China tariffs, which have gone down as we discussed, he's always said that he wanted to talk to Putin and he wanted to end this war. And so,
Yeah.
That's his main concern.
It is because he understands that, once you stop that, once the killing stops, which is, and I have to believe that Tulsi Gabbard's been in his ear about this the entire time. Like I really
Absolutely.
do. He's become so much more focused on we're going to end this in a way that is nonviolent. We are going to use economic pressure and we're going to use
Which
diplomacy.
is very, very Tulsi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Very,
that's
very,
very
very thing.
Tulsi
And let's just stay away
mentality, which is a
from,
good thing.
yeah, it's an excellent thing. It's an excellent thing. And so, and her influence over him, I think, is very clear at this point. And and I know it would be incredibly spiteful for the Democrats to try and destroy her appointment as DNI director, and they would do it just because. But we'll see. We'll see. So,
Yeah, we'll see. So I like her. I know people don't. I like her.
I adore Tulsi Gabbard. I adore her. I think she's the real deal. I think she always has been, and that's that. I read her book, dude. If you
I
want to,
mean, she's too smart for, you know, Capitol Hill. She
yeah,
really is.
I do recommend her book
Her
actually.
book.
Her read
Okay.
and her and just do the audiobook. She reads it. She's really good, and
Okay.
it's quite obvious. Um,
Definitely.
anything else?
No, I think we're good. I think we covered a good gambit of what's going on, and just
Yeah,
a
yeah.
not even a couple weeks into new
So
administration,
much.
not even a week into a new administration. So can you believe it's only been 4 days? I feel like it's been a
Um,
life. It's
yeah,
been very
no,
eventful.
it has been. It's like,
In a
well,
good way, in a good way.
yeah, absolutely. That whole Lenin thing about there are decades where nothing happens, there are weeks where decades happen, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. All
So,
right, Tracy, it was lovely talking to you this morning. I'm glad I pinged you this morning to remind you that we were doing this
I
because I
know.
forgot to
Thank
send out the,
you.
the friggin'
All
invite. I'm like,
good.
oh. So, thank you so much for stopping by
Yeah.
this morning, and we'll do this
Thank
again
you.
in a couple months.
Yeah, sounds good.
Right.
Awesome.
All right. And when did we schedule that I was going to be on your space?
Oh, so
Soon, right?
and you're on, I don't have my calendar right in front of me, but it's a couple weeks.
It's a
You
couple
will
of weeks
be
from now. Yeah.
on,
So we're going to do this
that'll be
again
on
with,
Wednesday Spaces.
yeah, on
So,
your Wednesday space. I just want to make sure that we gave that plug because,
yep.
well,
So
you
we're
deserve
gonna
that. So thank
let
you
me
very much.
let me get the date for you really quick so we let everybody know you are
Sure.
on February 19th.
February 19th. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Sounds good. I will be there happily with caffeinated and we'll do the thing. All right.
I love it. All
All right.
right.
Take care. And we'll talk soon.